Good morning, Brooke. How are you doing this morning? Good morning, Kylie. Good morning, Isaiah. All right, so the warm up, the question is, what do you know about taxes on any level? Kind of tired. I'm with you there, Brooke. Hi, Heidi. Hi, Miko. Yeah, I'm a little bit tired. We have a lot we're gonna do today. So good morning, Franchon. Good morning, William. All right, so our warm up that we have on there, hi Sadie, is what do you know about taxes on any level? So anything about taxes. What do you guys think you know about taxes? Hi, Kaylani. Yeah, I don't know too many people that like taxes. Okay. So what do you think that you might possibly know, Kaylani? Just anything. Guys, just throw anything about any kind of taxes. Good morning, Troy. Good morning, Magdalene. Hi, Jackie. So, I mean, when I say, okay, so when I say the word taxes, what comes to mind when you hear that word? Okay, so Kaylani, you're thinking about like when we have to do our tax returns every year. So you're thinking about that once a year. Perfect. Yeah, taxation on food too, right? So we have like sales tax, right? So when you go to the store and you see like something is $9.99, is that all you are going to pay? Generally not, right? Because we have taxes that we pay on top of that, right? Hi, Melissa. And it could be on prepared food. Hi, Aiden. It could be on clothing or shoes or okay, so those are the two things that you think of as well. Okay. All right. So have you guys given thought, and it might be kind of different, especially living in Nevada, which does not have a state income tax, but have you thought about that there's different levels of taxes? So like we were talking about tax returns, right? That's federal taxes that are taken out of your paycheck. So that's the federal level. And we've talked a lot about that, especially talking about macroeconomics and how does the government provide the things that we want them to provide for us? Well, the majority of it, hi, Melanie, hi, Jamie, comes from taxing us, right? But those aren't the only taxes that we see. So think about when you're buying gas or when you're going to the grocery store or when you have to register your vehicle. Like those are state taxes, right? So we pay taxes for things within the state. Okay. Okay. So it's not so much, Brooke, that you don't make enough money on your paychecks. It's that maybe you did not pay enough towards your tax burden that you might not get anything back. And I will tell you, this was the piece of advice that my father gave to me at 16, because by that point, I'd started working at the age of 13. So by 16, I was actually making enough money to file my own taxes. Okay. And the thing that my dad told me, and that was many, many, many years ago, was that the goal is to not get this large tax return at the end of the year. The goal was to not have to pay taxes on April 15th, right? That's when our taxes are due. So that they take just enough out of your paycheck to pay your tax burden, if you will, but they don't take so much out that you aren't getting that money during the year. Because when you give them more money out of your paycheck to go towards taxes, in essence, the way my dad explained it to me, was that you're giving the federal government an interest-free loan, right? Because they don't have to pay us back what they borrowed plus interest. If we overpaid them, they just give us back what we overpaid. Does that make sense? And so for me, that has been something that I have thought about for 34 years. Was the goal was not to make a whole bunch back. The goal was to have as much of my money in my paycheck so I could pay and do what I needed to do each time I got paid when I need the money, then later on. And that's just something that has kind of stuck with me. My dad was a chief financial officer, so, you know, he was a money guy. And so it's just something that's always stuck in the back of my head. It's something that I taught my son. And it's something that I explain to my students every year when we are talking about taxes. So, and when we get into the personal finance portion of this, which is coming up in module 11, when we're talking about financial literacy, we'll talk more about that. So just, you know, something to keep in the back of your head as we're going through all of these, right? As those of you who are working, those of you who are, you know, looking to get jobs, it's just something to think about, right? All right, so we are in module 9. We're moving into lesson 4, and we're talking about taxes, understanding taxes, the levels of taxes, how much we pay to the federal, the state, the local levels. Not only how much do we pay them, but what do they use that money for, right? So there's a lot of things. Module 9, lesson 4 it's a big lesson. There is a lot of information. This particular notebook, I believe, has like 14 questions in it. So it's a big chunk of stuff that we're going to go through, okay? So the goal today is to try and get through questions 1 through 7 in our notebook. And then on Wednesday, to finish out the rest of the notebook. So we'll do the first half of the coursework in the notebook today, and then the second half on Wednesday. All right. So just as a reminder, okay, your zombie project, not that it's due today, it was due, oops, hang on, let me go back. Your zombie project was due Friday, so it closes on 3/6. Okay, I don't know why I didn't have that fixed. I apologize for that. Remember, all of the work is going to be closing on the 6th because that's the last day to turn in work for quarter 3. After that, we will be working on module 9, lesson 5, but technically it's not going to be due until after spring break. Okay. Module 9, lesson 2 course arc closes on the 1st. Zombie project will close on the 6th. Your EverFi marketplace and your EverFi the economy, those assessment screenshots where I have your name, the assessment grade, and I need to be able to see which lesson that you completed. The easiest way to do this, and it was in the instruction video, and I keep saying this, and I'm hoping it'll catch more and more of you as we're doing this. Once you have gone all the way through the marketplace lesson or all the way through the economy lesson, those are the only 2 you're doing in the marketplace course. Once you have gone through the entire lesson, you have that 10-question assessment at the end. Once you have answered that, you get a grade. You need to screenshot that page. where it shows your name in your top right corner. It'll show me in the tabs, because I want your entire screen, that you are in either the marketplace lesson or the economy lesson, and it will give me an assessment grade, 60, 70, 80, or 90%. That's what I need the screenshot of. If you're not giving me those, I'm resending it back to you and asking you to get me the correct screenshot, please. Okay. Module 9, lesson 3, which we did last week, that will close on the 6th as well. Tomorrow is our small group meets in the afternoon, 12:30 to 2:30 in DLA, Rather SSG. Remember, you'll get that same information on your remind text. It'll be in the announcements, as I usually do. And then also in the announcements, I put it up there on Friday, there is a teacher survey. If you guys could get that completed this week. It does not have your name attached to it. I don't have your email attached to it. You can, I mean, obviously you can only take it if you're a CCSD student, but I don't know. All I get is the responses. I don't get who made what responses. Okay. Because I'm asking you guys to be as honest as you can be. All right. And Kaylani will talk about that at the end of class. All right. Any questions about what I've just gone over before we get into module 9, lesson 4? You're welcome. All right, so if you have not already opened up your course arc and your notebook, if you would please open up your module 9, lesson 4 course arc and notebook, that would be awesome. Okay, and I'm going to pull up the course arc first so that you guys all know, just as a reminder. Okay, this is what we're opening up. Can you guys give me a thumbs up reaction when you have your course arc and your notebook for module 9, lesson 4 open for me, please? See a couple, kiddos. As you guys are opening them, just as a reminder for like all of the objectives. Remember I said lesson 4 is really full. So we're going to identify sources of government's authority to tax, different types of tax bases and structures, who bears the burden of tax, key characteristics of a tax, the purpose and importance of Social Security, Medicare, and unemployment taxes, and how we analyze those expenditures and their categories in the federal budget. We're going to talk about those major entitlement programs, and we'll talk about why I don't like the term for that, but we'll come back to that. Types of discretionary funding in the federal budget. We're going to talk about state budgeting and taxing, as well as local types of taxes and spending. Okay. All right. So hopefully everybody's good to go, and they have, I'm seeing a few more kiddos. So let's go to our introduction. There's our tax return form. That's what I think a lot of you, when I said, what do you think of? This is probably what you were thinking of. So it says, while the government has a limited role in our free enterprise system, citizens do look to the government to provide protection, enforce the laws, provide social services of many kinds. To carry out those responsibilities, governments at all levels levy taxes. Citizens and their leaders debate how to ensure the tax system is fair and efficient for all taxpayers, including people like you. So why do I have to learn this, and how does it relate to me? Well, if you spend money, taxes relate to you. If you work, you're going to have taxes taken out. If you are thinking about Social Security, or you utilize any services provided by the government, including going to school, driving on roads, etc., then these things affect you every single day. Okay. So the very first question in our notebook, in every single notebook, is our essential question. Can and should government be fair to everybody? Okay, that's our essential question. So of course we know we Control-C copy, Control-V paste. And we put it as question number 1. All right. So everybody should have the essential question in their notebook, and we should be able to move on to the vocabulary. And of course, the essential question is in the chat. All right, so let's look at some of these vocabulary words. So we have proportional tax, where the percentage of income paid in taxes remains the same at all income levels. We've heard a lot of that when they talk about fair taxes, or they talk about we should just have a flat tax or 10% tax. That's what a proportional tax is. Regressive taxes, a tax for which the percentage of income paid in taxes decreases as your income increases. Generally, when we talk about regressive taxes, we're not talking about income taxes. We tend to talk about sales taxes, and we'll talk a little bit more about those as we go. Individual income tax, and that is a tax based on each individual person's earnings. Corporate income tax, obviously, that is a tax based on a company's profits. Withholding, that is the tax payments that are taken out of an employee's pay before we ever receive it. So you have a gross amount that you make. If you make $10 an hour times 30 hours, you have $300 check, right? But that's not what you actually receive. Taxes are withheld or taken out. So your gross pay minus your withheld taxes equals your net pay, okay? Tax deduction, that is a variable amount that taxpayers may subtract from their gross income. That's when we're doing our tax returns or certain things, depending on certain items that you have or you do, that you can lessen your tax burden. Budgets. So we know about individual budgets. We've talked about that this year, but you also have local budgets, state budgets, and federal budgets, and you're estimating your future revenue and your future expenses. Operating budgets is a budget for day-to-day spending needs. We generally don't talk about that on an individual level. We tend to talk about that when we're talking about businesses and governments. Capital budget, it's budget for spending on major investments, so like on machineries or infrastructure. Proportional tax, tax percentage of income paid remains, we've already talked about, remains the same. All right, so let's do our vocabulary. So percentage of income paid in taxes remains the same. Which one is that one, guys? Can you guys give me that? Proportional, good. Okay, proportional tax. Taking tax payments out of an employee's pay before he or she receives it. What do we call that? Withholding, good. All right, a variable amount that taxpayers may subtract from their gross income. That would be our tax deduction. And then, of course, a tax where the percentage of income paid increases as the income increases is progressive. All right, does everybody have that completed? All right, so we can control, like, copy and paste these into our notebook, but we're also going to add regressive tax to our vocabulary. So let me go to the notebook. So we have our academic vocabulary. This is the vocabulary directly out of your course arc. And then our vocabulary definition, right? The one that we create. So when we talk about a proportional tax, it's everyone pays the same percentage of tax no matter their income level. So it's not that we're paying the same amount, it's the same percentage, also known as a flat tax. Withholding, is taxes taken out of your paycheck. The tax deduction is various amounts the taxpayers can subtract from their gross income. And what it does is it lessens our tax burden when we do our tax returns. Progressive tax or taxes paid increases as your income increases. And I am putting these in the chat as we're going. And then our regressive tax, and that says taxes paid decreases as your income increases. And like I said, we tend to talk about regressive taxes when we're talking about sales taxes. Okay. All right. So all of those are in our chat. So hopefully you guys have that, and we can move on to the next page, which is taxes and spending. So we have 3 questions that are going to come off of this page. Questions 3, 4, and 5 are going to come specifically from this page in our course arc. Okay. So let me roll this up a little bit. All right. So the importance of national taxes. So you get, like, we've talked about this. Remember we talked about the 16th Amendment and how I talked about a way to remember that one is generally you get your first job at 16. You're so excited to get paid and you get your first check and you're like, where'd all my money go? Income taxes, right? So it's kind of that idea, right? The tax is just a requirement payment to your local, state, or national government. The federal government and most state governments levy taxes on personal income. Now, living in Nevada, you are super, super lucky that we do not pay income tax in Nevada. We are one of 7 states that does not pay income tax, meaning 43 other states make you pay income taxes. And if you live in New York, not only do you pay a federal and a state, but you also have to pay a city income tax as well. So can you imagine all of that money coming out of your paycheck? Yeah. So fairness or equity is one of the main goals of the tax system. But what is fair to one person may not be fair to another. Sound familiar when you guys say something isn't fair and I say, you know, fair is in the eye of the beholder, right? For example, some would argue that fairness requires that all people be taxed at the same rate. Others say that the person who earns more money should pay a higher percentage of income taxes. And in fact, this concept known as progressive taxation has been at the base of our income tax system since the beginning, right? All right, so we've got a video on taxes, and then we're going to go into our questions. Okay, so we're going to do the video real quick, and then we'll come back.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Hill. This is Crash Course Economics, and today we're going to talk about taxes. We're going to talk about why we have taxes, what they do for us, and why you should go ahead and take that raise that's going to bump you into the next tax bracket. Also, rebellions and the British Empire's bad judgment when it came to taxing colonies. While your struggles with taxes and the tax code may seem particularly unpleasant to you today, people have been paying and complaining about taxes for a long time, way longer than any of us have been alive, or our parents, or our grandparents. Ancient Mesopotamians paid taxes in the form of livestock and labor. There are ancient Egyptian texts and tomb scenes showing evidence of taxes, tax collectors, and even tax shelters. Taxation and tax collectors also show up in the Bible over and over. Taxes appear in Scripture as a necessity, like render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's. And tax collectors are in there as sinners right up with prostitutes. More recently, in 1927, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote, "Taxes are what we pay for civilized society. Maybe it's time we forgive tax collectors, too." So we've had taxes pretty much as long as we've had records of organized society. But why? What are the goals of taxation? At the most basic level, taxes raise money for government services. Taxes are used to promote the well-being of society, at least well-being as defined by the government in power. They help us afford services markets might not pay for on their own. Things like public safety and national defense and education. Taxes can be used to protect the environment. They can help a country implement fiscal and monetary policies meant to push along economic growth. Taxes can be used as a way to redistribute wealth in a society, from people who have more to people who have less. This can happen in a couple of ways, some more direct than others. An income tax system that taxes high-income earners at a higher rate than low-income earners is one example, and we'll come back to that. Government subsidies and vouchers, like food stamps and housing programs, also shift wealth. So do luxury taxes, basically an additional tax bill on expensive items like jet planes, expensive furs, and that really annoying diamond ring space on the Monopoly board. Governments can also use taxes to try to change people's behavior. Sin taxes on not good for you products like cigarettes and alcohol are meant to reduce consumption of unhealthy products. Gasoline taxes are meant to encourage people to drive less. France passed soda taxes to try to get people to drink fewer sugary drinks. Denmark passed and then got rid of a fat tax on foods that were relatively high in saturated fat. A handful of governments, including those in British Columbia, Ireland, and Chile, have instituted carbon taxes. These carbon taxes basically charge businesses and sometimes households for the amount of polluting greenhouse gases they use or create. These carbon taxes take different forms around the world. Residents of British Columbia, for example, pay an extra 6.67 cents per liter of gasoline as a carbon tax. For those of us in the US, Myanmar, and Liberia who don't use the metric system, that's about 25 cents per gallon. In Chile, power plant operators pay $5 for every metric ton of carbon dioxide that they release into the air. When economists talk about taxes, they sometimes divide them into direct taxes and indirect taxes. Direct taxes are paid by a person or organization to the government body that impose the taxes. These include property taxes and income taxes, where there's no intermediary, and I can't pass off the tax burden to someone else. Value-added taxes and sales taxes aren't exactly the same thing, but they're both good examples of indirect tax. They're collected by a store or seller or producer of goods, but they're actually paid by consumers. They're taxes that all consumers have to pay, regardless of how much money they make. A pair of socks at the mall down the street is going to cost me exactly the same as when a billionaire buys that pair of socks at the same store. Some economists say indirect taxes distort market prices and lead to one of the things most dreaded by economists, the Voldemort of economic outcomes: inefficiency. Economists also characterize taxes as regressive, progressive, and proportional. Let's start with regressive taxes. Regressive taxes are typically applied across the board, and on their face they might seem equitable because everyone pays the same amount. But regressive taxes take a higher toll on people with lower income than high-income earners. Sales taxes, especially on essential items, are considered regressive. That's why some places exempt food and prescription drug purchases from sales taxes. Some economists argue that fees for things like hunting licenses, toll roads, and driver's licenses are also regressive. Why? Well, imagine two drivers go to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get a new license. One makes $200,000 a year, the other makes $20,000. Both will pay exactly the same amount for their driver's license. The license fee is a much bigger hit for the lower income driver. And that's why regressive tax takes a disproportionate toll on people with lower incomes. On the other end of the taxing spectrum, there are progressive taxes. Progressive taxes are more or less the opposite of regressive taxes in that they shift the burden of taxation to people who make more money and away from those who make less. In the United States, our income tax is a progressive tax, meaning individuals pay more in taxes as they make more income. But before you start worrying about whether making an extra $100 this year is going to bump you into a higher tax bracket, it's worth understanding how the progressive income tax in the United States works. When the IRS calculates how much you owe in taxes, it uses marginal income tax brackets based on the amount of taxable income you earned in a year. These marginal tax rates represent the highest possible income tax rate you could pay. Right now, there are 7 tax brackets. But no matter which tax bracket you find yourself in, you're not going to pay that rate for your entire income. Instead, your taxable income gets divided up into chunks that correspond to each tax rate, and you pay the associated rate on each of those chunks. For example, say you made $37,450 as a single filer last year. That would put you in the 15% tax bracket, but you'd still pay the lower 10% rate on the first $9,225 you made. So if you took the extra $100 and made $37,550, you'd be bumped up to the 25% tax bracket. But again, you'd only pay 25% on that extra $100. Your effective tax rate would be lower. The other thing you got to keep in mind with U.S. income taxes is there are a huge number of tax credits, tax exemptions, and tax deductions that reduce the amount people owe. So your tax bill will never be as painful as that 25% tax bracket might make you think. Many other countries around the world have their own progressive income tax systems, but it turns out it's difficult to measure just how progressive any country's total tax system is, especially compared to another country. It's not as easy as looking at countries with the highest marginal tax rates and deciding they have more progressive tax policy, because so many other taxes and tax breaks come into play. In the U.S., some economists argue the progressiveness of our income tax code offsets the regressiveness of many other taxes we pay, if progressiveness and regressiveness are even words. So we've covered regressive and progressive taxes. The third type of taxes are proportional taxes. Proportional taxes require the same percentage of income for all taxpayers, regardless of how much they make. A flat tax is an example of a proportional tax. You'll hear politicians touting flat taxes, in part because they're relatively simple compared to the U.S.'s current incredibly elaborate tax code, and because they kind of feel fair. Imagine a flat tax of 10%. The woman making $200,000 ends up sending $20,000 to the government, while the guy making $20,000 sends only $2,000. They both feel a 10% pinch. Economists who oppose the flat tax say that feelings have no place in the tax code. They argue a flat tax isn't as simple or as fair as it seems. For one, they say that getting rid of all the tax deductions and exemptions and credits we mentioned earlier could change a whole lot of the economic decision-making that happens, from saving for retirement in tax-protected accounts to home ownership and donating to charities. All those activities are encouraged by the tax code we have now. Like we mentioned before, there are economists who argue the progressive income tax in the U.S. offsets some of our other more regressive taxes. They say a flat tax would shift the total tax burden away from the wealthy to the lower and middle classes, actually making our broader tax policy more regressive. All of this is complicated, even if it sounds simple. Before you buy into anyone's plan to reform the tax code, take the time to really read into what it might mean to the economy, and make sure you're comfortable with all the implications. Speaking of implications of tax policy, they can be incredibly serious and fascinating. A poor tax choice by a government can and has resulted in rebellions. Let's go to the thought bubble. One tax rebellion you've probably heard of is the American Revolution. After the 7 Years' War ended in 1763, Great Britain had a huge debt to pay off. It needed to raise revenue from somewhere and look toward the colonists in America. In 1764, the British Parliament started taxing molasses sales. In 1765, they enacted the Stamp Act, which added taxes to paper and legal documents. Colonists grew more and more frustrated with British officials, both with tax policies and other interventions. Anyway, you know how it goes. No taxation without representation, Boston Tea Party, a big war, the French get involved, and we end up with a free America, with taxes and representation, except in Washington, D.C. More recently, in India, there was another super interesting tax rebellion called the Salt March. In 1930 India, the British were in charge, and they had laws in place that outlawed Indians from collecting or selling salt. Instead, they had to buy it from a British monopoly, which collected an 8.2% salt tax. Mohandas Gandhi decided to defy the Salt Act by walking 240 miles to the coast of the Arabian Sea to gather tax-free salt. Along his route, more and more Indians joined him in the peaceful civil disobedience. He got to the beach, picked up a piece of salt, and broke the law. Thousands of others followed his lead, making and selling non-British salt in a non-violent resistance. The Salt March was extensively covered in newsreels and newspapers, and it brought international attention to the largely non-violent Indian struggle for independence. All that because of taxes. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Of course, there are other ways to get around paying taxes you don't want to pay, other than fighting or starting a mass civil disobedience movement. Based on historical documents, we know people have been running away from paying taxes for years, some literally picking up and leaving their homes. Other people have discovered career paths that get them out of tax bills. Historians think that some European men became monks during the Middle Ages to avoid being taxed. There's proof that some Chinese men joined Buddhist monasteries to get out of paying taxes. There is plenty of room for disagreement over how big government should be and what it should and shouldn't be doing. All those discussions matter to you as a taxpayer and as someone who benefits from taxation and government services. But as we've said time and time again, there's some services the market just won't provide, some protections it won't guarantee. No one likes paying taxes, but we do like what they do for us. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching Crash Course Economics. It's made with the help of all these nice
All right. So, like they talked about, like our country was founded on this idea that we really don't like taxes, right? Especially after everything the British did to us. So let's look at the impact of taxation. It says, looking at all the taxes taken from your paycheck can be discouraging, to say the least. We talked about how some people have said their parents really don't like it. You worked hard for your money and now it's being taken away. Similar feelings of frustration over taxes helped persuade American colonists to declare their independence from Great Britain. So it says, unlike those colonists, however, an overwhelming majority of citizens today consent to having a portion of their earnings taken by the government. We authorize the federal government through the Constitution and our elected representatives in Congress to raise money in the form of taxes. We agreed to this with the 16th Amendment to the Constitution. It's not something where we agree every single time. We agreed to it because the 16th Amendment was ratified by the people. So we agreed to them taking out income taxes. Because we are a representative democracy, we vote for people, we elect people who represent our needs, and they're supposed to do what's best for us, okay? Again, taxation is a primary way that the government collects money. Taxes give the government the money it needs to operate. The income received by a government from taxes and other non-tax sources is called revenue. And then without revenue from taxes, the government would not be able to provide the goods and services that we not only benefit from, but we also expect the government to provide. So, for example, we authorize the government to spend, well, we really don't authorize them to spend well over 3.5 trillion a year. They've been kind of doing that on their own, but we do authorize them to spend money on our national defense, on maintaining our highways, on things like education and law enforcement. We also ask the government to provide help to people in need. All of these goods and services cost money in workers' salaries, in materials, in land, and in labor. And all members of our society share these costs through the payment of taxes. So let's start looking at the questions in our notebook for this. So question number 3, it says, consider what might happen if the government cut taxes drastically. Okay, so what I said is, and this is mine, you do not have to, like, in any way, shape, or form, use exactly what I say. This is what I got out of it. It's just to help you out. Taxes from citizens is one of the primary ways that the federal government makes money, right? Revenue. These taxes are used to provide goods and services for the country. As citizens, we expect to have things like national defense, highway, education, and law enforcement provided by our government. Current taxation amounts also provide for many more services that many citizens expect, and a drastic cut in taxes would mean a drastic cut in those services being provided. That was my thought process. Is there something else that you think we should add or could add to this? Or is there something that should be said differently on this? Can anybody think of anything? Anybody? I need some feedback from you guys here. Is there something different we need to add? And you can unmute if you don't want to just type. You can unmute your microphone. I mean, if you think that there's something else that needs to be added to it or different, by all means, I will change it up. Anybody? You think it's good, Brooke? Okay, so we know our central question. We know our vocabulary is always the same. On this particular one, to get full credit, it says we have to have at least 3 to 4 sentences. Okay, so keep that in mind. Same with question 4 is 3 to 4 sentences. And then question 5 is 3 to 4 sentences. So if you guys think that's good, I mean, I know I have the full amount. Sometimes I have the full amount when I give you information. Sometimes I don't. I say, hey, you guys need to add to this. Right? All right. So the next one says, why do you think the majority of American citizens consent to have their earnings taxed by the government? And so this is my thought process coming out of what we read, okay, and prior knowledge. Once upon a time, taxes were not wanted and led to the American Revolution. Over time, Americans realized that they needed our government to provide services for us. Because of the passage of the 16th Amendment, Americans today automatically expect to have taxes taken out of their paychecks. Because we understand that our taxes are the country's paycheck, right? That it needs to provide services, we consent to have them taken out. Do we need to add anything else to this? Sure. Sure. Like, if you want to put, we consent to provide services such as, William? Yeah, you could add services in there. Absolutely. And I mean, we could do it from the national level, like defense, to things like Social Security benefits, education. Absolutely. Yeah. You could add that in there. So I'll give you what I have, and then you guys can add some of that more of that information in there to like flesh it out a little bit more. Okay. Oops, I lost my little thingy here. There we go. All right. Question number 5. Explain the impact of taxation on the United States economy. So taxpayers pay sales taxes on goods purchases. Taxpayers have taxes withheld from their paychecks. Taxpayers fill out an annual tax. I said form, and it should actually say return, right? Let's call it what it really is called. To decide if they have paid the government enough taxes for the previous year. American lives seemingly revolve around taxes. The government impacts the economy through the goods and services it purchases and it provides. About 1/3 of the nation's economy is based on government spending. And most revenue for government spending comes from the collection of taxes. Do we need to add anything to it or change anything from that? I mean, I kind of went a little roundabout way, but I thought explaining how taxes affect us and then how it then affects, the government, like on a day-to-day basis. I mean, if you guys can think of anything else we can add to that, by all means, let me know and we can throw that in there. Okay. Oh, the last two words somehow didn't copy over. So let me put that on here. It's right after Brooke's statement. Okay. All right. So are you feeling good with questions 1 through 5 now? All right. So let's move on to tax structures and tax bases so that we can get through questions 6 and 7 in the next like 8 minutes. All right. So tax structures and tax bases. Okay, so we've already kind of talked about tax structures when we talked about progressive taxes, regressive taxes, and proportional taxes. Remember that? Okay. So like this shows you a progressive tax. So your income is 25,000. Your tax rate is at 15,000. Your total taxes would be 3,700. At $75,000 income, the first 25,000 is taxed at 15%. Then the remaining 50,000 is taxed at a 25%. And then if your income is at 100%, the first 25,000 is at 15, the next 50,000 is at 25%, and then the remaining 25,000 is at 30%. So the more you make, the more you pay. Okay? Says check your understanding. What percentage of total income does each earner shown on the above graph pay? What does each one of them pay on here? What percentage? 15, right? That's what each of them pay. As you earn more money, then you pay more percentages. But if we're talking about the three on here, they're all paying the 15%. Good. All right, proportional taxes, it remains the same. So we talked about the flat tax, right? And then regressive taxes, we were talking about, and you saw in the video, where generally sales taxes tend to be a regressive tax. Now, tax bases. A tax base is the income, property, good, or service that is subject to tax. Different taxes have different bases. Individual income tax is based on a person's earnings. Corporate income tax is based on a company's profits. Property tax is based on the real estate and other property. The tax base for sales tax is on goods and services that are sold in the state. And then when government policymakers create a new tax, they first decide what the base will be for their tax, income, profits, property sales, or some other category. Okay. So let's go to question number 6 in our notebook. If I can find my little thingy here. Okay. Question number 6 in our notebook. How are progressive, proportional, and regressive taxes similar? How are they different? And then it says use evidence from the course art from the text. So it says we have to use 3 examples that are compared and contrasted in our rubric for question number 6. So it says progressive tax is a tax for which the percentage of income paid in taxes increases as income increases. People with higher income pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes. Proportional tax is a tax for which the percentage of income paid remains the same at all income levels, and regressive tax is a tax for which the percentage of income paid in taxes decreases as income increases. This generally seen in some states' sales taxes. There's an example, right? All of these tax structures are based on levying taxes that we pay in some way. They are different in that the level paid by each is different based on income, progressive and regressive, or doesn't change no matter the income level, proportional. So I've given 3 examples, which is what it asks for in the rubric for the 3 types of taxes that they asked about, which was the first part. And it did not finish this last little part that I'm highlighting, so I'm going to add that in there to the chat. Is there anything else we need to add or change on this one? Is there an example you think I should have made that is different, or anything that you feel could be changed or added to this? How about, can you give me the clapping hands reaction if we're good with this? Okay, see, Isaiah's good. Fran, Sean, Heidi, okay, William. I need some more kiddos. I'm still getting the same kiddos, which is, I'm like, not half of you guys are responding. Okay, Kaylani is, Magdalene is, okay, Aiden, good, okay. All right, so I wanted to make sure that I was getting more reactions from you guys to know that more of you guys had this. So we're good with this then? We're okay with it? We don't need to add? All right, so tax bases. It says, what is meant when a community is said to have a strong tax base? All right, so again, a tax base is the income, property, good, or service that is subject to a tax. The property tax is based on real estate and other property. The tax base for sales goods is goods and services that are sold. So when government policymakers create a new tax, they first decide what the base will be for the tax. Sales, income, property, some other category. A community that has a strong tax base has, oh, and I spelled that really, like, I don't know what I was spelling there. I just caught that. Has diverse businesses paying taxes, property taxes that are steady, and plenty of goods being taxed. So a strong tax base means that a community has multiple areas where they are making money from different avenues of taxes. Does that make sense? Do I need to add something to this? Or is that, do you feel like you understand what I was saying from that? You guys can give me some feedback on this so I know. All right, guys. So I just put that into our chat. We are coming to, we're at the end of our class period. We've got 1 more minute left. A reminder, everything's going to be closing on the 6th, if it hasn't already. Small meet tomorrow with attendance. Yes, you'll get a remind text. Yes, it'll be in the announcements. And then in the announcements, the teacher survey that is up there, if you guys could complete that this week, that would be awesome. I would appreciate it. And we're done for the day. So if you need me, I will see you tomorrow afternoon in small group meets, or you guys can send me emails. Have a good rest of the day, everybody. Bye. You too, Heidi. Bye, Aiden.